Welcome to the Expansive CEO podcast. I'm your host, Hannah Chapman, founder of Expansive CEO and X Squared Wealth Planning. Buckle in as we explore how to create true prosperity and build a business and a life that expands beyond yourself and makes a dent in the universe. Welcome, everyone, to this episode of the Expansive CEO podcast. I'm your host, Hannah Chapman, and today my guest is Jeff Yukikazu Sera, who is a self-development sensei and Reiki practitioner. And we are going to talk about one of my absolute favorite topics, which is learning how to heal your body, mind, and soul in order to be able to actually experience more of the prosperity that is inherently around you at all times. And so, yeah, we have lots to talk about, lots of experience, I think, on both sides about how this shows up. I know in my own life and with my clients and with, people I work with. So, Jeff, thank you so much for being here today. Can you tell us a little bit about who you are and what you actually do? What does self-development sensei and Reiki practitioner mean?
Yeah, thank you so much for having me today, Hannah. I'm excited to be here. And so I'm a self-development sensei and Reiki practitioner, and I support people with going on an introspective journey of healing. And so taking a look at, do I carry any self-limiting beliefs? Do I self-sabotage? And then doing the work to build self-confidence, self-worth, self-respect, self-love. Um, and in doing so, I support with some of the energetics or some of the spiritual aspects of it with the Reiki's energy. And so there's kind of two ways that I work with people. One is they come to me specifically for self-development, and then we infuse a little bit of Reiki into that. I work with my clients one-on-one on a weekly basis for an hour and a half. So the first hour is conversation, and we discuss, the things that are top of mind, what their goal and focus is for the day. And then the last half hour is set aside for meditation. And while they meditate, I'll provide them with distance Reiki, depending on the things that came up during that conversation that day or whatever is present for them. I'll support them energetically with working through that. And then I also have people that come to me specifically to do work in Reiki. And when I work with someone, I prefer to work in person, but I can also do distance. And during those sessions, I'll get a feel or a sense of what may be coming up for them. And so I'll ask, would you like for me to share that or keep that kind of just to myself and suppressed? And when they want it to be shared, then we typically will dive into a conversation that ends up being about their self-development. A lot of the times when there's physical pain or something being stored in the body, it's coming from something emotional that they've held on to or something that they haven't processed. And then it manifests itself as like a physical ailment or potentially diseases. And so doing the work to support them in their healing, but addressing the root cause of the issue. That's the primary focus of the work that I do. And within that, there's some additional kind of ways that I provide those services. I have some containers where it's, a deeper dive. So I have a 3-hour session in one day, and I also have an 8-hour session in one day. And so it really depends on the individual, what they're wanting to work through or understand about themselves, and then how intense of a process they want to go through.
Yeah, and that's so I can share from experience like that Jeff is amazing. And Reiki is such a beautiful way to really like just lift. Like it's like allowing energy to move, right? That's been stuck. At least that's been like for me, that's been my experience in different ways of experiencing Reiki with you, and also in person and in sound healing, different ways like what's happening and where are you holding on to, energy from other people or from past events or whatever's, there. It's like, it feels like a heaviness and allowing that energy to move, right? It just brings such a lightness. Um, is how I experience it for sure.
Yeah, I always say that like when there's something that happens and there's an emotion tied to it, but we don't really give it the time and space to feel it, then what we really are doing is kind of taking this sack of potatoes and throwing it over our shoulder and walking around with it. And it's like you're saying, right? That sense of heaviness or that weight you're walking around with versus when you allow yourself to feel it, it's like putting that sack down and just allowing it to flow. And
Mm.
so sometimes after we've been doing that for so long, and myself included, like that's what actually led me to Reiki was holding on to a lot of emotions I never processed. And so you you get used to it, and it doesn't feel like a weight. It becomes your baseline, just like, oh, I'm used to carrying this. I don't know what it's like to put it down.
Mm.
And that becomes almost scary to process. And so Reiki comes in and kind of supports you with lifting that up and making you feel like, oh, this is not something that is scary. It's something I can work through and move through, and understanding that all of the emotions are temporary, so long as we allow them to be felt and processed. If you hold on to it, then it just becomes something else, and you hold on to it, and um, it becomes more uncomfortable than it needs to be.
Oh, that's such a good visual and metaphor for this because the fact that you or that we normalize this, like that's exactly in my mind, I'm seeing like a backpack full of rocks. And that's how it's been described to me as well too, right? Like you put the rocks in and you just keep going. You don't notice, right? You don't notice that you've normalized carrying the weight of so many unprocessed emotions, whether they're yours or other people's. Um, if you tend to be very empathic and hold on to other people's emotions, right? Those go in the backpack and you
Yeah,
just are walking around with them. And I think what you are speaking to right now is that sense of like when we put that down, when we allow ourselves to process through it and put the backpack down, it's hard to even describe to someone who's so used to the backpack how lightness feels, how it feels to process emotions and let them move through. And so, and then what that means on the other side, like what does that mean when we talk about having and experiencing more prosperity, more abundance in your life? Like just think about that visual. Okay, look, keep the backpack, but let go of the rocks. You think about
yeah.
it that way, like now you literally have more room, you have more capacity for love and for expansion and for prosperity. Um, yeah. What do you think of that analogy?
I love that with the backpack where it's like, yeah, you can empty it out, remove all the weight, and then you have this wider capacity for the things you want in there. Where
Mhm.
maybe it's not rocks anymore, but now it's, the things you enjoy, snacks.
Sure, yeah. What are the snacks? Do you want to bring some, salami and cheese on your hike rather than rocks? I don't know. Yeah,
Yeah.
it's a good way to put it. So when you are working, let's say with clients, right? This talking about limiting beliefs and healing body, mind, and soul. I know I experienced that in certain ways. It certainly emotional healing um has been one of the greatest levers for quantum leaping in my business and just business growth in general, my personal growth, my own again, my emotional healing from suppressed emotions over the last several years has allowed me to create the business that I love and in expresses itself in many different ways. But how do you start someone if you were to start someone on that path of like what are they noticing, what might be showing up in their world as the limiting beliefs?
Mm. It's always like questions. So, what is the thing that they're most aware of in that moment? And then beginning to just pull that thread and unravel it, because we could start anywhere and everything within our life is interconnected. So it will touch on everything as we go on that journey, but it's the easiest place to start is with what there is awareness of, and then slowly kind of pulling back the curtain around that versus if we just dive into some other area, then it can get a little bit overwhelming. And so usually asking, what are some pain points you have, and what are the things that are preventing you from, achieving what it is that you want. Those are typically things people are aware of. And through the right string of questioning, it's supporting them to see how it's actually their choices that has created the limitation. Um, there's a concept known as, victim versus responsible. And so are you a victim of the circumstances, or are you actually responsible for them? And through a variety of choices and things that led up into that moment, you put yourself into that situation where it's much easier to just blame, well, oh, this thing happened at this time and place and I had nothing to do with it. It's like, well, you put yourself there at that time and place in some shape or form. And so what choices and decisions led you down that path? And if you take it back far enough, it's like, oh yeah, like I created that environment for myself, whether it's the people I surround myself with, the places I choose to go, the way I choose to spend my time. Um, and so once you start to realize that, it's it sucks at first because it's like, oh, everything's kind of my fault, right? But then it's like also, oh, everything is in within my control. So then I can change it and I can do something about it and not just be a victim of the things in front of me, but actually shaping how it all looks. Um, so supporting people with becoming aware of that and taking that first step towards realizing like, okay, I'm responsible for these things. That's great news because then I can do something about it.
Hmm. Yeah, that feeling of agency is critical. I think it's one of the most important aspects when you become aware. So I'm of the belief that we need the awareness first. Like, I love the way that you're saying that. Like, it's like whatever you're aware of, right? That's like your little beacon. That's your awareness. That's where you start. The little bright light. And then when you pull on the thread and like open it up more and open it up more, and you can see more light coming through, right? Oh, we're expanding that. We're expanding the awareness of what's happening for you. Because then once you're aware, once you have any sort of awareness of, um, if it's a issue in business, if it's an issue in your relationships, if it's an issue with your children or parents, um, issue with money, right? Like I get a lot of those questions. When we have the awareness, that's when we can start to build out, okay, what are your choices? And I think exactly what you're saying, when you become aware that you made choices here, you got choices back there that got you here. Now you get to, either if you make the same choices, you're going to just follow along the same path. You're going to keep experiencing the same things. But now that you're aware, you can make different choices if you want. If that's your agency. It's up to you how you want to continue on now that you have an awareness. Jeff just got to sneeze. It's okay. Bless you.
Thank you. Sorry. um,
All good.
yeah, so there's a kind of a 5-step process that I've uncovered for myself for healing. The first step is awareness. So you have to be aware that there's a problem before you try to fix it. Um, the next step is acceptance. So accepting like, oh, okay, yeah, this is an issue that gets to be addressed. Similar to like, if you get a wound on your body, if it's a small paper cut, you could just be like, that's not a big deal. I don't need to deal with it. Versus, yeah, like I'm bleeding and it won't stop. That's something I should probably address, and accepting that this is a problem. Um, and then the third step is forgiveness. So forgiving anybody involved. Whether it's other people or even yourself, for once you have that realization around the responsibility side, it's like you could be in self beat up to be like, how could I let this happen? But forgiving yourself to just accept that, hey, maybe I didn't know any better, or this was just something that during that time, this was the best course of action. And it led to an unfavorable outcome, but there's a lesson that I learned from it. And so forgiving everybody involved, because holding on to any type of blame or resentment doesn't support the healing journey. It just kind of self-perpetuates the negativity. The fourth step is acceptance again. So accepting that the things in our life that have happened are never going to go away. We can't just go remove a whole year of our life and be like, that never happened. It becomes like a scar in our body where over time the pain may stop, but it'll always be a part of who we are and part of our journey. And so accepting that it's not something we can get rid of, but that it's something that happened that led us to who we are today. And the last step is to get comfortable with revisiting it over and over. And that part could be very difficult because if it's something very intense or something traumatic, it's like, yeah, I don't want to go back there and revisit that. But over time, it becomes like an old friend. And it's like, oh, you're back. This is annoying. I don't want to deal with you, but I know that you're here to teach me something and I'm going to learn something from it. Because what we don't always realize is how specific events correlate to all aspects of our life and how we make decisions. And if we say, okay, I've dealt with that and I'm done with it, I'm going to pack it back up and never deal with it again, we'll
Mhm.
stop learning about how that experience impacts the rest of the other areas of our life. And so by getting comfortable with it, you're able to revisit it to be like, oh, this is actually this thing that happened in my childhood is impacting, I don't know, the way that I interact with my exercise or my diet, which I never would have correlated because it had nothing to do with each other initially. But over time, you develop these ways of interpreting things or defense mechanisms that are outdated software, but tied to a specific thing in your past.
What you're saying is it's like such a good description of healing. And I'm going to give an example of or tell you about a conversation I had recently with my husband. Actually, he was asking, we're talking about healing and growth and what it means to like move through things, and he'll notice, different things will come up multiple times, right? And so he has asked the question specifically, and I think it's a really valid one, that when you talk about healing, are you actually healing something, or is it just like you just keep going back and like picking at the scab, right? Is that what you're doing? And I'm like, you know what? I mean, from my perspective, the way that I, shared was the way that I feel about it is the way that you just described it, that we don't even necessarily know all the different facets of the thing. And it's like we're healing that piece of it. And so, yeah, you've healed a piece of it. Maybe it is something that, like you said, attaches to your relationship with food, but then your relationship with exercise is separate. Your relationship with how you react to people saying something about your appearance, right, is another aspect. And so every time that particular thing that happened, that particular traumatic incident comes up, and you allow yourself to feel it, allow yourself to see it, you're healing one facet, and then you heal the next facet and heal the next facet. And that's why it takes time and patience, and I think grace for yourself in order to actually heal, rather than, like you said, say, "Oh, I dealt with this, I put it in the box, it's done." Because that's not how healing works.
Yeah. I like the way you described it too, right? Like, is it picking at the scab? Because it could look or feel the same, but it's our perspective that changes it. Like, am I going through the healing and doing the work to revisit and maybe redress the wound versus am I picking at the scab that's already kind of calloused over and it's fine? Um, and again, it's based on our perspective, right? Are you looking for the opportunity here to do more work and more healing so that it can get better, or is it I want it to just be done and over with and I don't want to deal with it again? Um, but essentially it is the same thing that you're talking about. And so looking at it from the lens of, yeah, like what else can I learn from this? Not um, coming from that place of curiosity rather than fear. That's supportive in any of the healing journey because the fear is always present and it's easy for it to take control and have us drop back into kind of the patterns of the day to day or what we're used to, the complacency of things, where it's easier to kind of stay in the comfort zone than to push outside of it. And that's where a lot of the healing is done because you are facing things and looking at things that are difficult, um, that are emotional, that are easy to sweep under the rug and be like, I don't want to deal with this today. But in doing so, that is the self-sabotage because you're delaying it and it's building up until it reaches a point where it's like, I can't ignore this anymore because there's so much packed onto it. Um, And so, yeah, it really boils down to the mindset the individual has stepping into the work. Are they ready to do that work and understand that it will be difficult? It will be uncomfortable, but on the other side of it, that's where there's so much reward.
One thing, so whenever I hear someone say like it will be difficult, that it's interesting because then I've heard so many people share this as well, like, oh, you get to choose. You get to choose if it's difficult or not. And so there's like a yes and I think there to me. So I'm curious what you think too. I think going into it, right, making the choice to start healing from your past trauma. We all have it, whether it's trauma with a big T or trauma with a little t. Like we all have things from our past that are informing how we move forward into the future, right? And so whenever we decide to start a healing journey of any sort, whatever way that makes sense for you, there's it's going to be uncomfortable. I don't know anyone, and I know a lot of people have been through a lot of healing journeys that the beginning, right? The beginning wasn't full of trepidation and a little bit scary, and right, and the fears come up and they want to stop you, and the fear and the tears, right, of all of that stuff that you've been holding on to, allowing it to come up and out. I feel that the beginning by saying, "Oh, you get to choose if it's hard or not." I feel like that doesn't give justice to the actual experience of taking that step into the unknown and honoring that it can be scary and it might be difficult to make that first step because after, and you kind of alluded to this, once you get to the other side of any point that you've been working on, once you move through that point, you have just gone through a journey that you've never gone through before and you practiced. And now when you know see the next thing coming, you have, hey, I have an experience that says I can get through this one too. And as you keep moving through, it does it does get easier. You start to trust yourself more. You understand that you can do this healing work. You can move through your emotions and it's not going to kill you. Um, and so at that point, right, it does feel easier. I can move through things now with so much more gratitude and awareness and joy even than I could when I started. And it's an evolution. So I think to like try and like shortcut the process is doesn't do it justice. What do you think?
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I love that you highlighted that because I guess context is very important in this case, where difficult is, on one hand, it is a choice where this journey can be easy, but it's through surrendering. And sometimes the surrender is the most difficult part. And so for me, that was always the case where it's like, okay, things have to be difficult or hard for me to be creating results. That was a story that I carry. So then it was like making everything, including the healing journey, difficult. Whereas once you learn to surrender and just be like, okay, this is the thing that's present and we're going to work through, it gets a lot easier. And like you said, through experience and over time, it's like, okay, I've been here before. Oh, here's something I've worked through before. I know what to expect, where the discomfort isn't in the unknown anymore. It's more of just like, okay, here's a process or something that's not maybe fun to remember or think about, but understanding that by doing so, I'm going to gain insight and value that's going to support me in an area of life that I've been struggling. And then knowing that and focusing on the end goal supports in moving through the difficult part of it. Um, and when I say difficult, it's more of just anything outside the comfort zone because we gravitate to and our ego compels us to move into the comfort, to stay where we know we're safe, where we know that things are kind of easygoing and it's um, less daunting. And like you said, the first step is always the hardest, especially as you're beginning a healing journey, because there is so much unknown. There is not as much experience where it's like, yeah, I haven't ever dealt with that and I don't want to because I don't know what's going to come up. I don't know how I'll feel. But once you start that experience and start to have those, um, yeah, have that experience, then you understand that it isn't as I guess, daunting or as frightening as the mind has created it to be because we put it off for so long. And kind of that procrastination comes into play where it's another form of the self-sabotage. By putting it off for so long, we create a story or it becomes something that grows bigger than it actually is. And once you actually put focus on it, it's like, okay, this isn't as bad. Um, and so it's, again, it's about our perspective, and it's going to be as difficult as we say it is, or it's going to be as easy as we say it is. It's a matter of our mindset stepping into it. Like, yeah, this is maybe going to be uncomfortable, but I can make it easy and fun and lighthearted. Um, and finding the right people to support you in that. So, the friends and family that are going to be around you during this time are extremely important. The people that understand kind of the way that you need support, whether it's I need someone to have these conversations with, or I need someone to just sit with silently, and understanding for yourself who those individuals are and what they're capable of so that you can call on them based on what you need in that moment.
Mm. Yeah, and that's also where I found, having the right mentor or mm, guide through that process can be so, so powerful. I know for me, um, my first business coach that I ever hired was such an important guide, such an important part of my journey, um, to help me learn how do I heal this stuff, right? And it was what was interesting is that I've told the story before, but I'm gonna tell it again because it's good. Uh, that with her specifically, I hired her for strategy to be like,
Mm,
oh, you did something similar. Like you built a business similar to the business that I want to build. And like that's what I want. I want to be able to build it without making as many mistakes, shortcut the process. I want to do it right the first time. And that was certainly part of our work together was, marketing strategy and pricing strategy and working through all that kind of stuff. And the actual work of it was a lot of what turned out to be a lot of inner child healing.
mm,
And that was one of the things that she had really done that she like over her time of healing, she had done a ton of inner child healing work. And that is what I actually needed. And that's
yeah,
what like so much of our work it was so intertwined, right? Because like you were saying at the beginning, um it's that whatever the awareness is, that was immediately where my mind went to is that, we would talk about what was coming up. What's coming up in your world? What awareness is there? Whether that's a business or a business issue, client issue, or a family issue, or a friend issue, or, whatever. The thing that was coming up, it was like everything is coming up for a reason. Everything is coming up to be seen for some reason. And if we dive into that, it's all relevant, it's all related. And so, yeah, just thinking about that, that process, even that I went through, right? Like having I I I don't know. I can't imagine how I would have gone through everything that I went through without someone who had done it before,
mm,
right? To help guide me through. And then I've had many mentors since then for different specific things, right? To work on different things that were coming up at the time. Um and it's always been I've always known when it was the right thing, right? This is what I need now and this is the person that I'm drawn to for that thing. Um so yeah, and I know like for me in finance, a lot of people come to me around money trauma, around why can't I can't hold on. I'm making money. I'm making more money than I've ever made before, but I'm scared. I don't know how to hold on to it. And there's a lot of emotional processing to do with
yeah.
that. It's not all right, well, you need this kind of account and this kind of account, and you need to save this much and boom, you're done. That's not actually what's going on underneath that
Yeah.
question.
Mindset and the conversation they're having internally with their finances.
Hmm. Yeah. So when you were saying like for you, I thought this was an interesting overlap too. That was my story as well, was it's hard. Money is hard to make and hard to hold on to, was the story that I was gifted with as a young child. And through my family lineage and what had to be healed. So what was that like for you? Can you share how you've shifted? How has that changed for you?
Um, for me, it was that money is evil, or that it was something I didn't like. And it was based on my dad worked a lot growing up. And so he would leave or travel a lot for work. And the subconscious story that the child in me created was that money was more important than I was. And then that became something I kind of, I guess, grew to resent. And so over time, it was more of the self-sabotage of like people that have a lot of money are evil, or that people that have a lot of money are selfish or greedy, and then reinforcing that belief through observing the world around me and seeing how, people that tend to be in power positions are very affluent and make decisions that don't support the rest of humanity. And so then that became my own resistance to making money, because I didn't want to be that type of an individual that was selfish or evil or those types of things. And then having to do the work to realize that that was outdated software, that that was information that was a story and it wasn't true, and that money can actually do a lot of good. And that money is something that, in the right hands, can be used very powerfully. And it can be used to support others. It can be used to bring ease into life rather than, the struggle and difficulty. Um, there was also kind of the aspect of coming from a background that was much different from my peers. And so feeling like an outcast in the sense of the, I guess, financial support I had growing up versus what others may not have had. And so feeling like I hadn't done anything to earn that. And so this feeling of like the self-worth conversation, like why am I worthy of having parents that can provide for me while others are struggling? And so all of these stories were kind of built over time, and then not realizing that it was um, seeping into my business or the way that I operated with finances. And so doing the healing work to understand even where it came from was the first step to accept that this was an issue. And then rewriting those stories to recognize what was an old narrative and what is the actual truth today. Um, and again, it's one of those things where it's this ongoing cycle of, okay, I've worked through that, and as I elevate and find and discover new things, it's like, oh, and this still ties into how I do this or that. Now it's like, okay, now it's present in relationships, or now it's present in familial interactions, or it's present in other things that don't directly correlate to just finances. So it's really interesting to continue to do that work and see how it continuously unravels, where like I feel like, okay, I've done a lot of the work and it still shows up in this area or this area. So it's like, okay, I get to revisit that and learn something new about myself.
Hmm. Yeah, I think that has been one of the most powerful aspects for me of healing, is being able to see when things pop up again,
Mm,
how I respond differently.
yeah.
And one thing that I have also noticed that I think is really, really, really interesting is that I would say, like, the first several times, right? Something comes back up. It's like the first time you have the awareness, it's like something you don't want to look at. Like, oh no, that's not how I am, or that's not a piece of me, or I,
Denial. Yeah. That's
yeah,
not.
it can't be true. No, it's true. Um, and it's hard to look at. It might bring up lots of stuff with it, dredging up a lot of emotions that come up from recognizing that piece of yourself that needs to be loved and accepted. And all of those. I love your process: forgiven, accepted again, right? It's really beautiful. Um, and then the next time it shows up again, right? Being like, "Oh, I've seen this before," and we can move through it. And then the next time it shows up in another place, like, "Oh, I caught it even sooner. I noticed it
Yeah.
sooner," and we can move through it again. until, and I've had this experience, I can't remember the exact thing, otherwise I would tell the story, but the experience of when the thing, something similar happens again that would have triggered that wound doesn't. And
Mm,
you've actually like, oh, I can move straight to gratitude. Or I know, like, I feel so calm and confident, and my nervous system feels totally relaxed, right? You're not having that response. But I wouldn't have known that if I hadn't gone through the, like, seeing it the first time and going through the trigger over and over again and catching it sooner each time until suddenly I'm like, oh, that one's good. And maybe that means it's good for the moment, right? Doesn't mean it won't come back again some other time. But the, like, that process of healing, I think when you have done that work for long enough where you've had multiple triggers of the same thing to where you can then notice, I got through that one. Oh, that used to trigger me and it didn't at all this time, right? Like, that's a really freeing feeling. And I also think that's another piece that can help bolster us to know, like, the work that you're doing is making a difference. The work that we do on ourselves, when we get to that point of like, I can respond with grace, I can respond to someone who is having a reaction, I can respond with love, I can respond with patience, and it's not hurting me. I'm not trying to. I think that's the point. I'm not trying to respond with grace. I am responding with grace.
yeah.
And that's where we see, that's what's making, when we say when you do the work it makes the world a better place, that's what that means.
Yeah. Yeah, it's almost like breaking a habit, right? Like this repetitive cycle of, okay, something happens, it triggers me, and I this is my automatic response. So two examples of that for me were like I used to bite my nails a lot as like an anxiety response, and then I used to smoke cigarettes. Both of those were from like just a automated thing. And there was awareness, but also not, right? It was just like, this is just what I do. And then starting to get curious to be like, okay, why? Why is that the go-to? Oh, this is to fill the void of this thing that's lacking. Whether it's a sense of confidence or certainty or just like that anxiety of the unknown of like, or being idle. Like I would always bite my nails when I was idle if I was watching TV or driving or something that was kind of more mindless. And it was just to calm the nerves of the mind because I didn't have consciousness or control over it. When I became aware of that and put focus there, it was like, okay, catching it, like, oh, why am I biting my nails now? Oh, it's because of this and that. And then understanding the root cause of it, catching it over and over again to be like, okay, here's the pattern. And then what can I do to address it or put a pause on it to be to choose something different, to approach the situation with that grace. And similar with smoking, where it was like, okay, this is not something I enjoy doing. It's something I've told myself I enjoy doing because it's better than the alternative, which was to face the issue. And so then doing the work to face the issue, to override the need to go to that as a coping mechanism. And again, it was through repetition and time. And, it probably took me 4 times throughout my life to be like, okay, I'm going to quit. I'm going to quit. It's like, yeah, I would quit for a period of time. Then I'd go back to that because I didn't address the root cause. It was more of the physical habit. There wasn't the mental side that was being focused on. Once I stepped into doing the work on the mental side, then it became a lot easier to put the habit down because I knew it was something that didn't align to me. It wasn't healthy. It wasn't something I enjoyed doing. It was just an alternative to the void that existed. And so, yeah, getting familiar with it and seeing it each time was like, okay, I can choose to go and smoke a cigarette or bite my nails, or I can choose to fulfill the need that's present that my body's actually asking for. And that awareness allowed me to choose the graceful response.
Mm. Ah, so good. I want to make sure we have time for you to share what, how people can actually work with you. So if this is like, if you've been listening and you're like, this is okay, yeah, I do notice I'm self-sabotaging. I do notice when I'm limiting myself and I don't understand why. What am I doing? Why am I doing this? And that feeling, right? It's like you hear the right thing when you're ready to
Yeah.
make the next step, right? So if that's going on for anybody, how can they get in touch with you, and what are the ways they can work with you?
Yeah, it would always start with like an exploration call, which is a complimentary session where we dive into, what are the things that are top of mind? What is your focus and your goal, and what would you like to kind of get out of it? Um, and it's also kind of a way for us to see if there's a chemistry. I find that the people I work with, there's a chemistry going both ways where they're receptive to the way that I speak and the things that I share so that they're able to then understand it and receive the information and not be resistant to be like, nope, you're wrong. And the same goes for the energy kind of exchange where it's somebody I feel aligned to work with, where I feel like I could support them. And if not, then it's like, okay, then I can direct you to someone that may be more aligned to your style, what you're looking for, or the focus that you have. So the exploration call is really kind of a meet and greet, get to know you, see if we're compatible to work together. And then moving forward from that, choosing kind of which of the services or offerings I have that would best support the goal that that individual has. And the first kind of way to get in touch with me would be to get just message, whether it's on social media, email. My website has several forums that you can contact me on. And so just creating a touch point to exchange, a conversation, and then I'll send you different calendar links based on what it is that they're looking for. And then we go from there, where we just start the conversation to see what shape or form I can support in their healing process. And again, there's different containers where I work with people on a weekly basis, one-on-one. I have a group that meets every Monday night. It's a guided meditation with a little bit of networking. And then I have the 3-hour container and the 8-hour container that all support and kind of individuals going through their healing journeys. Some of it is virtual, some of it is in person. So again, it depends on their needs, where they're geographically located. But yeah, the first kind of step would be a conversation to see how I can support them.
And all of your contact information will be in the show notes. If anyone is looking for that, it'll all be there for you. And before we wrap, I want to say, like, I feel like this is the the way to the way to sell going forward, right? This openness to, like, we need to jive. We need to, like, I need to be able to, like, support and pour out, and you need to be able to receive from me, right? And so having a match between, you are looking for the thing that I do, and also you receive easily from me and I
Yeah.
can share. And so being able to, yeah, like, just be so open about that and say, hey, if we really jive, that's perfect. That's what we're looking for. We're not forcing a fit,
Yeah.
because there's so many beautiful souls that are helping people heal in all kinds of different ways. And same, I say the exact same thing. I know so many wonderful financial planners and coaches, and if I'm not the right fit, I can recommend 3 other people to you, no problem.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
so I just think that's really beautiful.
That's one of the things too before, where it was like, yeah, like the work is difficult because it was making it difficult by trying to make it fit for everyone versus
Hmm.
no, like look for alignment, look for the ease, because you don't want to have to go into a client call and be like dreading it. It should be somebody that lights you up to work with on both sides.
Hmm.
Because that's where the real magic happens. That's where the results come from.
Hmm. Oh, so powerful. So,
Mhm.
on that note, Jeff, thank you so much for being here today. As always, if you're listening and you have any questions or you want to hear more um, about this conversation or anything we've talked about today, send me a note. Let me know. Do we need to have Jeff on again? Right? What do we need to talk about more? I love to get your notes and your messages, and to hear what's resonating for you. So, if you have any questions at all, feel free to reach out. And thank you so much for being with us. Bye, everyone. That's it for this episode. Thanks for listening, and be sure to like and subscribe. And again, if anything resonated with you from this episode, I would love to hear from you. Email me at Hannah, HANNAH, at expansiveceo.com, and tell me about it. And if you're ready for your greatest expansion, you can find ways to work with me at expansiveceo.com and at x2wealthplanning.com. That's X, the numeral 2, wealthplanning.com. So until next time, remember that there is enough You are enough, and your birthright in this lifetime is to be expansive.